Welcome to today's viewers comments video. I have no idea which number it is, so it's this number. And we're still driving to the Birmingham Guitar Show, which we're going to do a vlog of with a bit of interview footage. And in the meantime, let's answer some of your questions.
Right, Pro Tools 101 first. Oh, Pro Tools First 101. Basics on why you should or shouldn't use it. Well, that's a deal breaker for me. If I can't use my Bias FX plugin that I already own, looks like I'm sticking with BandLab's Cakewalk for now. I might as well wait until I can afford a Mac and get Logic anyways, since I've already learned the basics in school. Thanks for the information, man. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, Pro Tools First, it's for me. Now I've had some distance from trying it, I would have really dropped the ball. It's, hey, here's an entry-level version that's free, but you can barely do anything. Okay, so I think you can record 4 channels of audio at once, which means you can't record drums. You can't use any external plugins. You can't put them in, which means that you can't see what other people are doing and go, I'm going to use that sound. No, you can't do that. And you can only have 3 projects and they're all stored to the cloud. It's not even enough to get somebody in my opinion. I mean, the reasons that I use Reaper and sometimes Cubase over Pro Tools is that I was able to use pretty much all the features and all the functionality for long enough when I was younger, when I was a student, that by the time I came to doing it professionally, I was like, okay, well, I know how to do everything and I'm not limited by these things, so I'm going to go out and buy the full license. This is what I do now. If you're going to try and give someone a taste of something, but such a small taste that they can't even get a grasp of what's actually going on, how do you expect to retain anybody? So, yeah, I mean, the whole Cakewalk thing is fascinating. I'm going to have to look at that soon, because a few months ago, must be a year ago now on the channel, we talked about Cakewalk Sonar being dead, and then because they were sold off by Gibson and now they've been bought by BandLab. And it's all free, and as far as I can tell, the entire thing is unlocked and available for free. Why would you not use that? And to a point, DAWs are all the same. I mean, they've got their little quirks and shortcuts and speedy bits and that. But yeah, I mean, and if you want to use Logic as well, go for it. I mean, it's not what I use, but Logic is very good for people who are songwriters and who are writing material. And if that's what you're doing, go for it. Good luck.
Why would you use... So, if they're both free, why would you use Cakewalk over... Cubase over Reaper?
Oh, well, Cubase and Reaper aren't free, but you can get demos of them that are completely unlimited.
Oh, I thought you said they were both free now.
No, BandLab is free.
Oh, BandLab. What's BandLab?
Cakewalk by BandLab is what used to be Sonar.
Right.
Sonar was owned by Gibson, and then, yeah, so that's now owned by this company, BandLab, who are doing stuff like network audio and some pretty cool little features where you can record with people online and do collaborations. Yeah, and so yeah, they already had their BandLab application going, and then they've bought Cakewalk. And yeah, I have yet to play with it since it stopped being Sonar, but from what I hear, it's really quite interesting.
Ah, yeah, and Reaper isn't free. It's just
it's a
different licensing model.
Yes, and there is a 60-day free trial, and then you can keep using Reaper after that trial. I guess there's no point in blocking you from using it. If you were going to crack it, you were going to crack it. So why not just not crack it? But as someone who uses it fairly religiously, I bought the license for Reaper 3, which then when it came time for Reaper 5, I bought that as well, and I will continue to buy it as long as I'm using the software because they deserve my money. And that's what it really boils down to in a lot of paying for DAWs and plugins rather than cracking them, is that you shouldn't really be cracking stuff unless you absolutely have no money. I mean, that's a dark subject anyway, but if you have the means to pay the people who make your world turn around, you really should.
I don't think you should be cracking things ever, it's stealing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say it's a dark road to go down, and maybe it's something that's worth talking about in a future video, because to a point, is it any different from like borrowing hardware from your friends? If it's just to try something out, and you know, it's a very dark, very grey subject.
I think it's pretty black and white. It's stealing.
Yeah.
If someone makes something that says this is what this costs, and you say no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change it so that I can use it for free. That is like walking into the shop and just picking it off the shelf and taking it home. And then it's like going to a shop stealing. But if they catch you going, oh, it's okay, I was going to bring it back and pay for it. I was either going to bring it back if I didn't like it, or pay for it if I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the time, I completely agree. Sometimes, I don't know, some very, very rare occasions, I'm on the side of the person who wants to learn and can't afford to get something, as long as their intention is to buy it. It's a difficult one, and times have very much changed as well, that pretty much everything I can think of now that you would need to make a hit record is incredibly affordable, where it never used to be. A good example is the Waves plugins, the Mercury bundle, which is all the Waves plugins, which used to be, maybe 15 years ago, you needed that to make professional quality sound on a computer. You just kind of did. At the time, it was $6,000 or $7,000, and absolutely nobody had the money for that. And so it's not great, and I'm certainly not condoning it, but I can see why you would try and get hold of a copy to learn how to use those things, so that, say, when you walked into a professional studio where they had paid for it, you would know what you were doing. And then maybe you got to be a famous producer, you got some money, you paid for the thing because you then had the money to do so. Whereas you never would have got to that point, never would have been able to afford it in the first place. It's, again, I'm not saying, yeah, you should do that, but now that's all changed, because something like the Slate Everything bundle, which I use absolutely every day, $15 a month. You skip a few Starbucks, you can afford that. So to me, that's a massive, there's no excuse there. There's no way I can afford it. Like, Reaper is $60 for the entire non-commercial license. You can go begging on the street for a day and get that kind of money. It's not the same as $7,000 or $6,000. It's attainable, and so yeah, the whole industry has changed in that regard.
Planning on buying a Line 6 JM4 due to backing track and looper reasons. Just practicing at home. Would you recommend to go for an iPad? I've got an iPad Pro 12-inch and Absolution. Can I get something similar to the Line 6 JM4 on my iPad?
Personally, I wouldn't touch a JM4 with a 10-foot barge pole. That's not because they're bad. It's because the design of them is over a decade old now. I know that Line 6 still make them, but I can't see them supporting them for much longer. I'd probably switch to something like a Boss Loop Station or something like that. It's probably possible to get looping on an iPad. It's not something I've seen, but you would need something like the orange OMEC Teleport, which is a little kind of guitar interface device to go with the iPad. By the time you've spent nearly £1,000 on all that stuff with the iPad, you may as well have just done it with a pedal. And yeah, the JM4s, they're kind of cool, but yeah, they don't have a very clear sound about them because they're very early digital. Some people actually like that, which is why the delay version, the DM4, is actually wildly popular. But yeah, it's not the one I would pick. I would be looking at something like a Boss Loop Station or something like that.
Next is Adam Gets Told. In fact, Leo Fender was not the inventor of the electric bass, it was Paul Tutmark. Leo was the first to sell it massively.
Did I say Leo was the inventor of the electric bass? Alright, retraction, that may not have been strictly true. He made it popular. I may have been oversimplifying for the benefit of entertaining an audience, shall we say.
Admit you're wrong. Say sorry, apologise to the world.
None of the above. No regrets.
And I profusely apologise to anyone who's offended by this video.
Sure.
He admits that he was wrong.
Sure. It's entirely possible that someone made an electric bass before Leo Fender. It is entirely possible. But since I've never seen it, and you can find a Fender bass in pretty much every bass player's house. Alright, so Fender invented the popular notion of the electric bass. How's that? Does that make you happy now?
I currently have a Celestion Vintage 30s, and they sound good. Playing classic rock and 80s hair metal. How would creambacks or greenbacks sound in place of the Celestion Vintage 30s? Can greenbacks and creambacks sound good with hard rock? If so, in your opinion, which sounds better of the two, greenback or the creamback?
They would sound different. And not bad, just different. Vintage 30s do the 80s hair metal thing very well, because Vintage 30 is quite kind of mid-forward. They speak quite loudly. They've got quite a kind of an upfront sound to them, whereas greenbacks, and by extension creambacks, which are kind of the next evolutionary step of the greenback, have a bit more of a kind of a scooped kind of sound to them, where there's not as much mid. And especially the greenbacks, they do a certain thing when you put a lot of volume through them, where they buckle and they bend and they do this kind of softening thing that, if we're talking real classic rock, AC/DC are incredibly well known for using greenbacks in all of their cabinets. And if you want an example of how greenbacks can sound, listen to an AC/DC record. The difference here is it depends very much what amp you're using. If you're using an older amp like a Marshall Plexi, the amp itself is very mid-forward, very mid-pushed, and so that little bit of a mid-scoop that you get in greenbacks balances out very well. Whereas if you're using a more modern high-gain amp, the high-gain modern amps are quite mid-scooped, and so the Vintage 30, which is mid-pushed, balances that the other way. So you may find that if you use a modern high-gain scooped amp with greenbacks, which are also scooped, it may not sound how you wanted it to sound. Conversely, if you use something like a Plexi with the Vintage 30s, you may find that the mids are ripping your face off because the combination of the two is too much. I find the reason why certain guitarists use certain combinations of heads and speakers is because there's almost kind of a magic formula. If you try enough combinations, you'll find one that works, and then 100 other guitarists will use that combination and agree and go, that works, which is why you find certain tried and tested combinations. There's nothing to say that it won't work for you either way though, and yeah, greenbacks are great. They're just a little different. Try it, see what you like.
Soldering wires to speakers is a bad idea because the heat can fry the coils, just crimp terminals and you can slip on and off.
Generally, I don't solder wires to speakers. Generally, I try and put spade connectors on where I can. But if you're melting voice coils and speakers by soldering a cable to them, you may be doing it wrong, pal. You may be sitting your soldering iron at far too high a temperature on the terminals for far too long. Because to melt a copper voice coil with its insulation, you're going to have to put a lot of heat into that. So yeah, research good soldering technique and proper temperatures and proper solder, and you should find that there's absolutely no damage whatsoever. Every speaker cabinet that I've had where the speakers have been soldered in, there's been absolutely no problem, and a lot of cabinet manufacturers do in fact solder in speakers because it's a far more permanent solution, which means that as the cabinet gets thrown around a lot, the chance of the connections coming loose is practically nil. And yeah, it's just sounds a bit paranoid to me there. So yeah, as long as you're confident in your soldering skill, if you're the kind of person who could melt anything by soldering, definitely don't do it to speakers. But if you can solder properly, I'm sure it's fine.
For a sound engineer, the levels are too low in the video. Go into another U-tuber-by.
So you can't turn your speakers up? Can't turn your headphones up? I for a short while did videos live streamed where the volume was relatively low, and that was because there was a whole thing at the time about YouTube normalization and bringing down the levels of your audio, which meant that, as far as we could tell, if you went too loud in it, they just turned it down anyway. So the theory was, why do that? Why not just have it at the right level? And for a little while, especially with the live stuff where it was hard to get feedback, it turned out that we could have gone a bit louder, and that's okay by me, because you don't lose quality by having things a little quieter. And yeah, if you really have that much of an issue with not turning up your headphones or your speakers to hear what we're saying, then maybe that's just a bit fickle.
Just to point out, this is on the DAW 101 Part 2 routing video.
Part 2 routing. Well, that's had, what, 50,000 views, 40,000 views? I don't think many other people have said the same thing.
What wasn't that the series where you said it wasn't recorded as well because it was in a rush and you wanted to do it again?
That was part 1, but yes, I do want to do that whole series again, actually. Yes, so that's one of the intentions for later in the year, is to not do them live, but do a full produced version in the studio where we've got time to think, time to work it all out rather than doing it live. Make sure the audio levels are right, make sure all the audio and video are in sync, because that was a really irritating thing that happened with part 1, is a little bit of it, maybe a 2-minute segment is slightly out of sync in the audio, but somehow that all resolved itself in the rest of the video. But that doesn't matter, because what people see, they then just go, out of sync, oh, you don't know what you're doing. So it's quite an irony in a way that our most successful video to date is also one of the ones that has a technical error in it. It's quite frustrating, but there's very much not a lot I can do about that, because with it being live and with it being so popular, if I then just re-edited that video and re-uploaded it, it would have 0 views on it, which would mean that it would just tank in terms of getting out to viewers, and it would in many ways shoot the channel in the foot.
So on remastering, so the question is, if you did remastering, you would need the original recording tapes, correct?
No, not necessarily. I mean, ideally, yes. If you're remastering, for like a good example of remastering is something like a best of album, where you need to get tracks from different albums at different times. And yeah, if you can get the best quality original source tape, or if it's digital, the original digital mix, yes, that is the ideal. But it's quite common for that to not be available, whether it be through licensing disputes or through mechanicals, or maybe the original's been lost or damaged. It's more common than you might think, especially with things like remastering someone who did a lot of work in the 40s and 50s, per se. A lot of those, there either may have been no original tape master, it may have been recorded straight to vinyl, it may be that the original's long lost, and it's quite common for mastering engineers to get a vinyl copy that's in relatively in poor condition of a song, but that is the oldest and best sounding version of that song that they can get hold of, and then all they can do is then transfer that at the highest quality they can and clean it up, get rid of the pops and crackles and background noise and that kind of thing to a degree, and then it becomes a discussion of how far can you bring it back without it sounding weird. In terms of more on remastering, I would highly recommend that you guys go and check out a podcast called The Mastering Show by Ian Shepherd. He's a professional mastering engineer who does nothing but that day in, day out. And they cover a lot of topics, including things like remastering, the loudness wars, what you can do. It's something that I've certainly picked up a lot of stuff from. So check that out.
Sir, which do you prefer? Mic and amp or DI and amp?
Mic and amp or DI and amp? That's... what video was this on?
DI boxes for recording guitars is a good one, worth it.
Oh, so it's on the video specifically about DI boxes. That question doesn't seem to make much sense in the way it's structured, but from what I assume, is he asking basically, do I prefer using a real amp with microphones? And the answer is yes. I always prefer, given the choice, using a real amp with real microphones. Although I do always take a DI recording as well wherever possible, so that I've got the original performance without the character of that amp, so that I can then do things later like maybe add a different tone from a virtual amp or send it back through a real amp or whatever. But I, a lot of the time, will use virtual amps because they're more convenient. I can just load one up and go, does this sound work? Yes, it does. Okay, on we go. If I'm looking for ultimate quality, then it's real amp all the way. But a lot of it it's application specific. If I'm working on, I don't know, let's say I'm working on some sort of R&B track or a drum and bass track, something that's heavily electronic, and the songwriter, producer just wants a bit of guitar in there, but the song already sounds quite electronic, I might just throw a virtual amp on there because it's quicker, easier, and then go to them, how does this sound? Play a few chords, and they go, nah, I'm looking for this kind of sound, change it. How does this sound? How does this sound? Okay, that's the one, done. And that, for that kind of application where it might just be throwing a few chords in somewhere or a little bit of a riff or something, that might be far more convenient and conducive to a good workflow. Whereas if it's something like a classic rock album and every track is completely held down by classic rock guitars, then I would definitely take the time to use a real amp and real mics and get the tone, because that extra 2% that you can get out of that could make all the difference when it's one of the main focuses of that entire song. So that's what it boils down to for me, is what is the focus of the work that you're working on. If the focus is how good do the guitars sound, mic and amp take that time. If the focus is I just want to hear a song and I'm not quite bothered about it as long as it sounds like a reasonable guitar, I'd go for a virtual amp because it's quick.
Here's an easy question that can't have more than one answer. For some reason, I get zero audio playing out of my computer speakers on playback. I can hear it if I have my headphones in the interface. Anyone know how to fix this?
Yeah, plug your speakers into the interface. It's something that a lot of guys who are just starting out...
Yeah, this is in the...
101 basics.
101,
yeah, I can tell from the question. This is the kind of thing that people who are just getting into recording audio won't have seen before. That a dedicated audio program wants to work with a dedicated audio interface. They are very much designed to work together. You won't hear any sound out of your computer speakers because the audio is not being sent to the sound card that they're connected to. You can hear sound coming through the headphones on your interface because that's where the sound is being sent. Part of the design of audio workstations is to have the sound sent as quickly and as accurately as possible to something, which standard onboard audio doesn't usually do. Standard onboard audio on your average PC or Mac, it works, but it doesn't work in the same way as an audio interface. It's not designed to be low latency. That's a phrase you'll come across a lot, is low latency. And because if you're plugging a microphone, say, into the interface, you need to be able to get that sound into your workstation, then processed with whatever you're going to do, and then back out to those speakers or headphones quick enough that it doesn't upset you with a big delay and make you feel dizzy or off-put or whatever, and that's a low latency workflow. The only way to do that is to use dedicated hardware in that interface. And you can get better latency by using dedicated hardware. USB or Thunderbolt's better, PCI Express is just as good as Thunderbolt, and it's just one of those things where one of the reasons that professionals use studio monitors rather than computer speakers is they're designed to sound as accurate as possible rather than sounding cool, but they will always be routed through an audio interface. What you can do, what a lot of guys do, is change their Windows settings or OS X settings to send all of their audio out through the interface that they bought, and then just plug your speakers straight into the interface, and then all your Windows sounds and all the sounds from your workstation should all then come out of the same speakers. So that's probably what you're looking to do. That's about all we've got time for today, because we're almost at Birmingham Guitar Show, and so we're going to do more filming another time. I've got to edit all this together, including the vlog we're doing today. I've got about 6 videos in the pipeline to edit. Yes, so there's lots to do, and I hope you all enjoyed it today. Hit the like button if you found this useful and interesting. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this and the regular podcasts that we do and the technical videos. And support us on Patreon if you are so inclined. Big thanks to our patrons on Patreon, because you really help us to do things like this, like coming down to this guitar show, because it's quite a long drive. And you guys help to fund little trips like this. And in return, you get first pick for any questions on things like viewers' comments. On the regular podcast where we have questions, you guys get first shout, you get regular early access to videos, and to anyone who's already a patron, thank you so much. So in conclusion, I'm Adam Steele for Hot Pole Studios, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.